3 years ago, my own sister personally sent me to a reform center. The fake son claimed I cost the company 100 million. My eldest sister threw me straight in without a second thought, to teach me some manners. My biological parents just stood there and watched coldly, like I was some kind of stain on their perfect lives. 3 years later, I learned my manners and came back. But now, they're the ones who regret it. After 3 long years, I'm standing at the front gates of the Joe family mansion again. To be honest, I never thought I'd come back here in this lifetime. That night, 3 years ago, this was exactly where they dragged me out. I remember it so clearly. It was pouring rain that night. The ground was covered in mud. 2 security guards grabbed me and dragged me away. I clung to the door frame for dear life. My fingernails were completely split open. My blood was smeared all over the frame. I bet you can still see the stains even now. I turned back and screamed at the house. Screamed for mom, for dad. Screamed for my eldest sister, my second sister, my third sister. I told them I didn't touch that 100 million from the company. I told them I didn't frame Joe Ming. I begged them, just believe me this once, please. No one believed me. They just stood there on the steps, staring down at me. Like they were looking at a rabid dog. Like I was born rotten to the core. My dad couldn't even be bothered to look at me. He just turned his back. My mom covered her mouth and cried, but she was crying over how she could have given birth to a monster like me. My eldest sister, Jo Qingyue, coldly ordered the guards to hurry up so the neighbors wouldn't see the embarrassment. My second sister pushed up her glasses and said, "Send him in. Let him be properly reformed." My third sister, Jo Yui, looked like she wanted to say something, but one glare from our eldest sister, and she shut right up. As for Joe Ming, he was standing behind everyone with his head down, his shoulders trembling. He looked like he was absolutely terrified, but I was the only one who saw the malicious smile in his eyes the moment he looked up. I will never forget that smirk for as long as I live. 3 years, 1095 days. I'm back. It's a sunny day today. The sun is glaring so hard it makes my eyes sting. I'm standing outside the Joe family gates, holding a faded canvas bag. Just this one bag, it holds everything I've owned over the last 3 years in that place. I look down at my clothes. A simple gray shirt, washed until it's completely faded, but I've buttoned it up perfectly straight. Even the very top button is fastened. The doctor said, dressing neatly is the first step to maintaining order. The doctor also told me, people like me, what we need most is order. I am a person who follows the rules now. The gates open. The first one to rush out is Joe Ming. He still looks exactly the same. So perfectly clean and pure. Wearing light gray loungewear, his hair falling softly over his forehead. Looking like a completely harmless, innocent little rabbit. When he sees me, his expression shifts instantly. First, he freezes. Then, his eyes immediately go red, and the corners of his mouth twitch into a smile. He forces out this look of overwhelming surprise and heartache, sprinting over to me in a rush. "Brother, you're finally back." He grabbed my arm, his voice thick with tears. "Brother, you've lost so much weight. You must have suffered in there. Mom, Dad, and I missed you every single day. Praying for you to come back." Missed me every day? I felt absolutely nothing inside. I just lowered my head, and looked at the hand gripping my arm. These were the very same hands that personally handed that fake evidence to our dad 3 years ago. "Brother, why aren't you saying anything?" Joe Ming blinked at me. "Are you still mad at us?" "Brother, I had no choice back then. All the evidence pointed to you." Before he could finish, my mom ran out from behind him. She was wearing a dark red cardigan. Her hair was much whiter than it was 3 years ago. The wrinkles on her face were deeper, too. The moment she saw me, her eyes instantly welled up with tears. She stumbled down the steps, and opened her arms to hug me. "Ting Ting, my Ting Ting." She threw her arms around me. She hugged me incredibly tight, her whole body trembling. "You've suffered so much. It's all Mom's fault. Mom is so sorry." I stood there, completely motionless. Her tears rubbed against my neck. They were warm, carrying a faint, salty scent. She still smelled of that familiar perfume. It used to make me feel safe. It used to smell like home. But now, I only had one thought in my head. What do her emotions have to do with me? The doctor said emotions are noise. I don't need to listen to noise. I took a step back. The movement was very slight, but steady, just enough to slip out of her embrace. Her hands froze in midair. That stunned expression on her face. How should I put it? It was quite amusing. "Ting Ting." She froze. What's wrong? Brother just got back. He's definitely not used to things yet. Joe Ming quickly stepped in to smooth things over. He reached out to support our mom. Mom, please don't be sad. I'm sure brother still cares about us. My third sister, Jo Yui, also ran out the door. She was wearing a cream-colored maxi dress, her hair flowing down. Her eyes were red, too. Ting ting. She ran over and tried to grab my hand, but I dodged to the side. Her hand stopped in midair and she gave an awkward smile. Ting ting. How did you get so thin? Did you not eat well in there? I'll have the kitchen make you something delicious in a bit. I looked at their faces. To be honest, I could clearly see the tears and heartache in their eyes, but I felt absolutely nothing inside. It was just this empty feeling right where my heart should be. There was nothing there, just like a dried up well. Throw a stone in, and you won't hear a sound. The doctor was right, emotions can be completely trained out of you. The clicking of high heels echoed from the stairs. My oldest sister, Jo Qingyue, came downstairs. She looked exactly the same. Dressed in a dark suit, her hair pinned up without a single strand out of place. Not a trace of emotion on her face. Her eyes were so icy they could freeze you to death. She's the one who really runs the Jo family, and the very person who personally sent me to the reform school all those years ago. She stood on the steps, looking down at me from above. Still with that same critical, judging stare. You're back. She finally spoke, her voice as cold as ever. It has been 3 years. Did you finally learn some rules in there? The moment she said that, the air in the living room instantly froze. My mom stopped crying. My third sister stopped talking. Even Joe Ming went completely quiet, just standing off to the side. His eyes darting back and forth, waiting to watch the drama unfold. They were all staring at me. If this had been 3 years ago, hearing that would have made me cower immediately. I would have kept my head down, tears welling up in my eyes. And whispered, I know I was wrong, sis. I would have desperately tried to explain how good and obedient I was in there. I would have begged her to stop looking at me like that. But now, I just raised my head and stared at her jawline. The doctor said, looking directly into someone's eyes easily triggers unnecessary empathy. Looking at their jaw or collarbone is not only polite, but keeps you completely detached. I finally spoke, my voice very soft. Completely steady, without a single trace of emotion. Director Joe. The moment those 2 words left my mouth, Joe Qingyu's brows snapped together in a fierce frown. My mom gasped in shock. Ting ting, what did you just call your sister? I completely ignored her and just kept going, reciting my rehearsed words all at once. I need 3 things. First, my own private room. Second, my phone. And third, my personal ID documents. I spoke every single word clearly, neither rushing nor hesitating. It sounded like I was checking in at a corporate front desk. My mom started panicking, stepping forward to grab my hand. Ting ting, what nonsense are you talking about? This is your home. I'm your mother. Were you terrified in there? Just talk to me. Mom is right here. I pulled away from her grasp once again. Mrs. Joe. I looked straight at her. May I ask if my requests can be fulfilled now? The title Mrs. Joe acted like a knife, stabbing straight into her heart. All the color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. What did you just call me? Are you insane? Ting ting, I'm your mother. If I don't call you Mrs. Joe, what should I call you? Ms. Joe? I asked back, my tone completely sincere. The doctor taught me that extreme honesty is the best blade to cut through emotional blackmail. I wasn't trying to piss her off. I was simply stating the facts. She is, indeed, my biological mother. But legally speaking, she is nothing more than Zhou Jinan's wife. Zhou Qingyue let out a cold sneer. She cut off my mother's sobbing and glared right at me. Looks like 3 years locked up in there really gave you some nerve. You think playing these pretentious little mind games with your family is gonna make us play along? She turned and snapped at the butler. Give him his ID card and his old phone. Send him up to the guest room at the very end of the 2nd floor. I'd love to see just how long he can keep up this deadpan act. She genuinely thought I was faking it. She thought I was doing this to make them feel guilty, or as some kind of silent protest. I didn't argue back. The doctor said right and wrong aren't based on feelings. They're based on behavioral evidence. Whatever they wanted to think was just their own brain activity. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. I grabbed my canvas bag and took the ID and phone the butler handed over. I turned around and headed for the stairs. Right as I reached the landing, Joe Ming caught up to me. He blocked my path. The people downstairs couldn't see us from here. In a flash, that pained look on Zhou Ming's face vanished without a trace. It was replaced by a hushed, fake concern. "I'm really so happy you're finally back." He let out a sigh and leaned in close. "But listen, bro, whatever you do not bring up that 100 million from back then. Our older sister is still furious. If you stir up trouble again, they might just send you right back to that place." As he spoke, his eyes were locked onto my face, watching for any reaction. He was testing the waters. He wanted to see me snap, just like I did 3 years ago. He wanted me to jump up and scream, "You were the one who embezzled the money, not me." Then, he could conveniently throw himself down the stairs, and the whole family would condemn me all over again. What a tired, familiar script. I stared blankly at his hypocritical face. "Are you asking me to be reasonable? Or are you asking me to just keep taking the abuse?" I asked him softly. Zhou Ming froze. He clearly didn't expect me to reply. With something so totally out of left field. "Bro, what are you talking about? I'm just looking out for you." The doctor said lying is bad. And framing people is bad. I kept my eyes fixed on him. My voice was even quieter now. Like I was preaching some absolute truth. "If you're trying to remind me, you need to provide solid proof linking me to that 100 million. But if you're trying to threaten me..." I paused for a second. My tone remained flawlessly polite. "Whoever crosses the line first suffers the consequences. Now step aside, young Master Zhou." Blocking the hallway is incredibly rude. Zhou Ming stared at me like he had just seen a ghost. He didn't see any anger in my eyes. He didn't see any fear either. All he saw was a dead, empty abyss. I completely ignored his stiff, frozen body, and walked right around him, heading straight for the guest room at the end of the hall. The moment I shut that door, I locked out everything to do with the Zhou family. The room wasn't huge, but at least it was clean. The bedsheets are brand new, and there's a pot of pothos sitting on the desk. I stand by the window, looking down at the garden, at those perfectly manicured bushes. It's been 3 years. This house hasn't changed a bit. But me? I'm not the same Zhou Ting from 3 years ago. I pull out my old phone, the one that hasn't been charged in 3 years, and plug it in. The moment the screen lights up, I see countless unread messages. All of them from 3 years ago. I don't open them. Instead, I instinctively open my notes app, and type out a single line. Observation log, day 1. Physical boundaries, established. The doctor was right, keeping a log is the best way to stay sane. I sit on the edge of the bed, watching the sky slowly darken outside. Zhou Ming's face flashes in my mind again. That fake, sickening concern of his. 3 years ago, that exact look was what fooled me. I treated him like my real little brother. I told him absolutely everything. I trusted every single word he said. And what did I get? He turned around and sold me out. Sold me out without leaving a single trace. I don't hate him. Really, I don't. No hatred at all. The doctor said holding on to hate takes energy. And I just don't have that kind of energy anymore. But, I remember every single thing he did. I remember exactly how he set the trap, step by step. How he slowly pushed me into the abyss. I remember it all. Suddenly, footsteps echo in the hallway outside my door. A knock on the door. Ting ting? It's Mom. I made some soup for you. Could you please open the door? I don't move a muscle. Ting ting. Mom knows you're still angry. But we are a family. Blood is thicker than water. Blood is thicker than water. What a beautiful phrase. 3 years ago, when they sent me away. Why didn't anyone say blood was thicker than water then? I close my eyes, listening to that woman crying outside my door. I feel absolutely nothing. Observation log, end of day 1. Noise level, moderate. Emotional fluctuation, 0. The next morning, at exactly 6 a.m., I wake up right on time. It's a habit I picked up while I was locked away in there. No matter how exhausted I was the night before, my eyes had to be wide open by 6 a.m. Because if you're late, you get punished. If you don't get out of bed, you get punished. Everything had to follow the rules. I go wash up, and hang my towel exactly 5 centimeters from the edge of the wall. The doctor said, when you have no control over the outside world, take control of your immediate environment. I stare at my own face in the mirror for a while. I've gotten so thin, my eyes are totally sunken in, and my skin is so rough now. But my eyes, they're much brighter than before. Clearer. The doctor said it's because I've completely purged all those useless emotions. Works for me. When I finally head downstairs, The rest of the Joe family is already gathered. The long dining table is packed with an elegant breakfast spread. They even have my absolute favorite sugar cakes from that old traditional bakery. It used to be that every time I came home, my mother would buy them for me. My third sister, Jo Yi-wei, catches sight of me. Her eyes lit up, and she tried to stand up to pull me close. But one sharp glare from my oldest sister stopped her. I sat down. Jo Qingyue spoke with ice in her voice, as I walked to the very end of the dining table. I pulled out my chair and sat down, without making a single sound. Since you're back, we need to lay down some ground rules. Jo Qingyue set down her coffee cup. The clink of the porcelain sounded, unusually harsh in the dead silent dining room. She pulled out a printed sheet of paper from beside her, and slid it right to the middle of the table. Rule number 1. Without my permission, you are not allowed to step foot outside this house. Rule number 2. You will have absolutely zero contact with the family business. And you will not reach out to your old contacts. Rule number 3. You are strictly forbidden from talking to outsiders about what happened over the past few years. The Joe family cannot afford that kind of humiliation. She glared at me, her tone like a judge sentencing a prisoner to death. Do I make myself perfectly clear? My mom whispered softly from the side, trying to smooth things over. Qingyue, Ting Ting just got back home. Aren't these rules a bit too, Mom? Jo Qingyue cut her off abruptly. The whole reason we sent him away in the first place was to cure him of his pathological lying. If we don't lay down the law right now, he's just going to drag the Joe family down again. I looked down at the piece of paper in front of me. The printed words were crystal clear. Every single rule was designed to strip me of my humanity, turning me into an invisible object. Zhou Ming sat right beside Jo Qingyue, playing the devoted brother by handing her a tissue. His voice was sickeningly gentle. Come on, sis, don't be mad. I'm sure my big brother understands why you're doing this. He turned his head to look at me, his eyes dripping with a winner's mock pity. Don't blame our oldest sister. The family is just looking out for you. As long as you just behave and do what you're told, we can all still be one big happy family. Looking out for you. Those words felt like a dull, rusty saw, grinding agonizingly against my freshly healed scars. I calmly set down my silverware, and raised my eyes to meet Jo Qingyue's gaze. CEO Joe, tell me, did you bring me back to a home? Or are you just transferring a prisoner back to his cell? Jo Qingyue's face instantly dropped. What did you just say? According to the laws of this country, unlawful restriction of personal freedom is a criminal offense. I pulled out my old, battered smartphone. Right in front of everyone, I hit the record button. Now, please look right at my phone, and repeat those 3 family rules, for the record. The dining room plunged into an instant, dead silence. My dad slowly lowered his newspaper, his eyebrows knitting together in a deep frown. My mom gasped, covering her mouth in shock, looking at me like I was a complete stranger. Jo Qingyue looked like she'd just been slapped across the face. She shot up from her chair. Jo Ting, you've got the nerve to lecture me about the law? Who the hell do you think you are? I am Jo Ting. I stared blankly toward her collarbone, my voice deadpan and perfectly level. My therapist told me, if I can't quite understand the motives behind someone's behavior, I should always keep a record for evidence. The demands you just made go way beyond family rules. Legally speaking, that is false imprisonment. I calmly stood up, and slipped my phone right back into my pocket. Acting all refined like a schoolteacher. If you're not going to repeat yourself, I'll just pretend that piece of paper doesn't exist. Jo Qingyue was trembling with rage, her finger shaking as she pointed at me. You ungrateful wretch, you spent 3 years locked up in there, and you didn't learn any manners. But you sure learned how to turn against your own family. Second sister, Jo Rushao, hadn't said a word until now. She pushed up her glasses, her eyes filled with the cold, calculating scrutiny of a professional lawyer. Ting Ting, you have changed. She finally spoke. You have gotten smarter. You know how to use this kind of behavior to grab attention, or rather, to make threats. She turned to look at Jo Qingyue, her tone completely certain. Big sister, in psychology, this behavior is called an acquired antisocial personality. He isn't trying to be reasonable. He is trying to establish a sense of control. I looked at my lawyer of a second sister. 3 years ago, it was her who used that airtight logic of hers to string all the fake testimonies into a deadly chain. Nailing down my guilty verdict, second sister, I called out to her with perfect politeness. Since you know the law so well, then you should know that without a restraining order from the court, nobody has the right to restrict a citizen's freedom of movement. As for grabbing attention, I gave a self-deprecating smirk, the curve of my lips barely visible. What makes you think I still need your attention? The doctor said, never try to wake someone who is pretending to be asleep. You just have to rip their blankets right off. I turned around, not even looking at the spectacular mix of colors on their faces, and headed straight for the door. Stop right there, Zhou Qingyue roared furiously from behind me. I stopped in my tracks and looked back. Is there anything else, CEO Zhou? Where are you going? To get a replacement SIM card. I replied coldly, and I am dropping by the hospital while I am at it. What are you going to the hospital for? My mom asked anxiously. The doctor said that after being in a high-stress environment for so long, I need regular psychological evaluations, just to make sure I am not a danger to anyone. I looked at Zhou Ming, letting my eyes rest on his perfectly fake face for a second. After all, young Master Zhou looks quite fragile. If I accidentally bump into him, he might just accidentally fall over again. Zhou Ming's face went completely pale. That fear of being seen right through flashed across his eyes. I pushed the front door open. The sunlight was a bit blinding. I didn't look back, because I knew that right now, in the Zhou family living room, Zhou Ming would definitely go to second sister, discussing how to use more professional methods to completely eliminate me, this unstable factor. And all I have to do is wait. The doctor said bad people always leave traces behind out of greed. I just need to wait for them to slip up and be a proper debt collector. Observation log, day 2. The psychological game has begun. The target's emotional fluctuations are severe. Noise levels are rising. By the time I came out of the hospital, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. The psychological evaluation results were pretty good. The doctor said all my indicators are very stable. I don't have any aggressive tendencies, nor do I have any self-destructive tendencies. It's just that on the emotional empathy scale, the score was shockingly low. The doctor said that's normal. Anyone who's been through that kind of environment is bound to be a bit emotionally numb. I didn't feel much about it. Whether I have emotions or not doesn't even matter to me anymore. I just got my phone set up. I slid the SIM card in and turned it on. A flood of messages poured in, all from 3 years ago. Some from old classmates, some from former coworkers, and a few were from Zhou Yui. Ting Ting, where are you? Ting Ting, please reply to me, okay? Your sister is begging you, just say something. I didn't even read them. Just cleared them all. Let the past stay in the past. I walked over to the bus stop to wait. An old lady was standing next to me with a grocery basket. Probably just coming back from the market. She glanced at me, probably thinking my clothes looked way too worn out. She stared for a couple of seconds, but didn't say anything. I actually like this feeling. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody looking at me like I'm that cursed son of the Zhou family. The bus arrived. I got on and found a window seat. The bus rattled along. I stared out at those familiar streets. The same streets I walked down countless times 3 years ago. To be honest, this city is still just as bustling, just as vibrant as before. But looking at it now, it's like staring at a faded old photograph. Everything is still there, but at the same time, it feels like nothing is. My phone buzzed. It was a text from that unknown number. It only had one line. Send me today's evaluation results. I replied with a single word. Okay. The doctor said, she's the only person who actually wants what's best for me. Even though her way of caring is a bit cold, a bit ruthless, even a bit terrifying. But she was right. In this world, the only thing that won't betray you are the rules. Only order is eternal. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. My mind drifted back to that night, 3 years ago. Right after I was locked up. Locked in a room with 4 blank, white walls. No windows, no bed, just a rock-hard chair. They made me sit there, staring at the wall for the entire day. The first day, I cried. But by the 4th day, I couldn't even make a sound anymore. I just sat there, staring blankly at that white wall. And as I stared, it felt like I finally understood everything. Later, the doctor told me, that was called learned helplessness. After that, she started teaching me other things. Taught me how to observe, how to record, how to control my emotions, how to replace my feelings with pure logic. She said the only way I'd ever walk out of there was if I mastered all of it, so that I could never be hurt by anyone ever again. And I really did learn it. The bus arrived at my stop. I got off and started walking back. By the time I reached the gates of the Zhou family villa, it was already pitch dark. The front door was wide open, and the place was completely lit up inside. I could faintly hear people talking and laughing. We must have company. I walked in, and the living room was absolutely packed. Just a bunch of extended relatives from the Zhou family, plus a few business associates. They were all sitting around together, sipping tea, snacking on pastries, and having a good time laughing and chatting. But the moment they saw me walk in, the living room went dead silent. Every single pair of eyes snapped right to me, and the way they looked at me, how do I even describe it? It was like they were looking at an animal in a zoo. It was this mix of morbid curiosity, like I was some kind of freak show. Is that the one who was locked up for 3 years? An aunt muttered under her breath. She leaned in to whisper to the person next to her. Keep your voice down. I heard people who come out of those places aren't right in the head. Little Ming is so much better. Look at how well he runs the company. I swear, the biological son is nothing compared to the one they actually raised. Every single word of that floated right into my ears, loud and clear. But I didn't stop. I just walked straight over to the water dispenser, grabbed a clean glass, poured myself some warm water, and took a slow sip. The doctor told me, other people's judgments are just their own projections. They don't define your reality. So, I just didn't care, but I did notice one thing. Zhou Ming wasn't there. Where could he be? Right as I was thinking that, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Zhou Ming was coming down. He had changed into a brand new outfit, a light blue casual suit. His hair was styled perfectly, and he was wearing that flawless, plastic smile of his. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. He walked right over, holding a glass of champagne. Brother, you're back, he said with a huge smile. His voice wasn't too loud, but it was just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. Brother, why didn't you tell anyone you were going out today? I was so worried about you. He stepped right up to me, looked me up and down, and sighed. Brother, those clothes are way too old. Let me take you out to buy some new ones later, okay? We're the Zhou family, after all. Going out dressed like that, people will just laugh at us. He sounded so sweet, so considerate. He played the perfect, sensible son. And all the relatives around us were nodding along, praising Zhou Ming for being so generous, so kind, such a good little brother. I didn't say a word. I just kept drinking my water. Zhou Ming probably thought that wasn't enough. He took another step closer, dropped his voice, and whispered so only I could hear. Hey, big brother, look around. Even though you're back, nobody here wants you. You're just a piece of trash that nobody loves. The second he said that, he jumped back, and his face twisted into this look of pure terror. He threw his hands up, totally exaggerating it. Whoa, hey, calm down, I was just trying to help. All the relatives gasped in shock. Someone even started yelling for security, as Zhou Qingyue pushed her way to the front of the crowd. Her face livid. Zhou Ting, what the hell is wrong with you now? Do you have any idea what kind of occasion this is? She didn't even bother to ask what happened. She just pinned the blame straight on me. Zhou Ming cowered behind Zhou Qingyue, his shoulders trembling, like a frightened little rabbit. Sis, please don't blame my brother. He just got out of that kind of place. It's totally normal for him to be emotionally unstable. I'm fine, as long as he doesn't get violent, it's okay. He was hinting to everyone in the room that I was prone to violence, that I was some kind of dangerous freak. I stared at his perfectly innocent-looking face, then glanced at Zhou Qingyue's furious glare. And finally, my eyes swept over my parents standing nearby. They were frowning too, their eyes full of caution. This was my family. I set my glass down on the table. The base of the glass hitting the wood made a soft click. I took a single step forward, stopping right in front of Zhou Ming. He thought I would react just like I did 3 years ago. Have a total breakdown, screaming and desperately explaining that I didn't want to hurt anyone. A hint of smug satisfaction flashed across his eyes. But I didn't. I raised my hand, and with absolute, chilling calmness, slapped him right across the face. The sharp crack went off like a thunderclap, exploding through the living room. The force of the blow whipped Zhou Ming's head to the side. He staggered back a couple of steps, the champagne glass slipping from his hand, shattering all over the floor. The entire room fell dead silent. Everyone was completely stunned. Even Zhou Qingyue just froze there, like she couldn't process that I actually dared to hit him. Zhou Ming clutched his red, swollen cheek, staring at me in utter disbelief. Tears instantly welled up and poured down his face. Brother, Why did you hit me? My mother let out a piercing scream. She rushed over and threw her arms around Zhou Ming. Then shoved me back hard. Are you out of your mind? How dare you lay a hand on Xiao Ming? I stumbled back 2 steps from the shove before catching my balance. Facing the angry glares of a room full of people, I calmly adjusted my shirt cuffs. My tone remained so flat and steady it was unnerving. The doctor said, that slandering others is bad behavior. And it's my job to stop bad behavior. I stared dead at Zhou Ming. My eyes completely emotionless. Just now, you verbally attacked me. And you used your body language to create the false illusion that I was threatening you. That is slander against me. Right and wrong aren't based on feelings. They are based on behavioral evidence. Whoever crosses the line first, bears the consequences. This slap is the settlement. My words plunged the entire living room into an even more eerie silence. They just stared at me, like they were looking at a completely heartless machine. Zhou Qingyue finally snapped out of it, her whole body shaking with sheer rage. Zhou Ting, not only have you learned absolutely nothing, but now you've learned to get physical too, huh? Seems 3 years in the correctional facility still didn't teach you how to be human. She shrieked fiercely, spinning around to yell at the butler. Go get a rope and tie him up. Call security, and call the police. The atmosphere in the hall plummeted to absolute zero, with Zhou Qingyu's voice still echoing. The butler had already brought 2 security guards, and they were closing in on me. My mom held Zhou Ming tight, like she was protecting a baby from a monster. Her eyes were full of pure disgust for me. My dad, Zhou Jinan, stepped out from the crowd. His voice was heavy, carrying an authority you just couldn't question. Zhou Ting, you are such a massive disappointment. He looked right at me, his eyes full of nothing but disappointment and rage. 3 years ago, you stole money and lied. We sent you away to get straightened out, because we wanted to save you. But now, you're actually attacking people in public. Do you have any respect left for this family at all? I just looked at him. He was exactly the same, always loving to stand on the moral high ground, dictating exactly how everything should be. He didn't even ask what Zhou Ming had said to me. He only cared about the result. That I got physical. 2 security guards reached out to grab my shoulders. I shifted my body just a bit, dodging their hands. My doctor used to say, when an environment loses its order, the only real sense of safety comes from the rules. I completely ignored the guards. Instead, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I tapped the screen a few times. My hands were dead steady, not a single shake. Zhou Qingyue let out a cold laugh. What, trying to record us again? What good is recording at home going to do, Zhou Ting? You are not walking out of those doors today. I lifted my head and gave her a look. Then, right in front of everyone, I dialed 3 simple numbers. 911. The entire hall went dead silent in a second. My dad's face turned completely black with rage. He clearly didn't expect me to actually call the cops. The call connected almost instantly. Hello? I need to report a crime. Someone at the Zhou family mansion is illegally holding me against my will. And they are attempting to physically assault me. My voice was totally calm. Every word was crystal clear as I gave them the exact address of the house. There are multiple eyewitnesses on the scene, and all video evidence has already been backed up to the cloud. Please send officers immediately. I hung up the phone. I slipped the phone right back into my pocket. Zhou Qingyue was so furious she actually started laughing. You called the cops? Zhou Ting, you actually dared to call the cops on your own flesh and blood? Director Zhou, you've got it all wrong. I quickly corrected her. The police aren't here to arrest family members. They are here to deal with criminals. She tried to say something back, but my dad immediately grabbed her arm to stop her. He just stared at me, and for the first time, there was a look of real calculation in his eyes. He was a man who cared about his public image more than anything. If the cops actually showed up, tomorrow's headlines would be all over it. The biological child of the Zhou family calls the cops for help on their very first day back. The company's stock would tank in an absolute heartbeat. Ting Ting, just put the phone down. We can sit down and talk about this. My mom started softening her tone, trying to use that sickeningly fake motherly love to calm things down. We were only doing this for your own good. Just apologize to little Ming, and we can put all of this behind us. My doctor used to say, cheap tears and delayed comfort are nothing but absolute noise. I cut her off. I raised my wrist and checked my watch. The cops will be here in exactly 5 minutes. Director Zhou, you have exactly 5 minutes to think about your next move. So, are you going to tell the guards to back off? Or wait for the cops to force your hand? The guards just looked at each other, too scared to make a move. They didn't want a lawsuit either. Joe Ming hid in my mother's arms, his face completely pale. He'd probably never seen anything like this. In the past, all he had to do was squeeze out a couple of tears. And I'd be locked in solitary confinement, starved, or sent away to that absolute nightmare of a place. But now, I have no tears left to cry. I left my very soul behind in that correction center. 5 minutes later, police sirens wailed in the courtyard. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the living room windows. Glaringly bright, my third sister, Jo Yui, panicked and scrambled to get the door. The officers walked in looking dead serious. Who called the cops? I raised my hand, and pushed past everyone to step forward. I did. Here's my ID. I handed over the ID I'd just gotten replaced, and along with it, I handed them my phone. This is an audio recording of my eldest sister, Ms. Jo Qingyue, issuing a restriction order against me, as well as a video of these guards attempting to illegally detain me. Jo Qingyue's face completely froze. My second sister, Jo Rushao, the so-called lawyer who claims she's never lost a case, was standing there, absolutely stunned. The officer finished listening to the tape, frowned deeply, and turned to look at my father. Mr. Joe, here in this country, restricting someone's personal freedom is against the law. Even if they are your own flesh and blood, once they are an adult, they are an independent citizen. My father took a deep breath, barely managing to keep his composure. Officer, this is just a family matter. The kid just got back home, his emotions are a bit unstable. According to the recording, he sounds perfectly stable. The officer snapped his notepad shut, his tone strictly business. You, on the other hand, ganged up to corner the person who called us. Mr. Joe, if you don't want to take a trip down to the station for a statement, I suggest you dismiss these guards immediately, and guarantee you won't restrict Mr. Joe Ting's legal rights again. The officer turned back to me. Mr. Joe Ting, if you need to file for a restraining order or move out of here, we can assist you. I looked at that whole house full of people. My father's livid face, Jo Qingyue's absolute fury, my mother's stunned disbelief, Jo Ming's sheer terror, and the complicated expressions on my second and third sisters' faces. That won't be necessary, officer. I gave a very polite bow. As long as they understand that I am no longer bound by their twisted family rules and only answer to the law, that's enough for me. After the police left, the living room was dead silent. The relatives had already made up excuses and slipped away. The only ones left were the core members of the Joe family. My father stood in the shadows, glaring at me so hard it felt like he was trying to bore a hole through my skull. What exactly did you learn in that place? He asked, his voice icy. I paused my steps on the stairs, my hand gripping the freezing cold banister. I learned how to deal with animals. I turned around, looking down at them from above. The doctors said, when a person is stripped of every last ounce of dignity, they either die in the mud, or they learn to use the system to fight the system. Mr. Joe, Mrs. Joe, CEO Joe, I called them out, one by one. My voice didn't even tremble. Welcome to my world. After saying that, I went straight back to the guest room and quietly locked the door. Observation log, day 4. External system intervention, successful. The noise was forcibly cut off. The Joe family is starting to feel afraid. The doctor always said, fear is the only cure to wake them up. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out into the pitch black night. It was already dead quiet downstairs. All that shouting had stopped. The Joe family must have scattered, retreating to their own rooms, left alone to process what just happened tonight. I wonder what they're thinking right now. Are they cursing me for being an ungrateful wretch? Or are they regretting their decision to lock me away back then? Or maybe, they aren't thinking about anything at all. People like them never reflect on themselves. They just blame everything on everyone else. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling was pure white, exactly like that solitary confinement cell at the Reform Center. Back when they locked me in there, I used to just lie there like this, staring at the ceiling. Just staring, all day long. Sometimes, I would wonder, what if I actually died in here? Would they even be sad? Would my mom cry? Would my dad regret it? Would my sisters even remember me? But then, I finally understood. No, they wouldn't. They would just breathe a massive sigh of relief. Finally free from dealing with their shameful mistake of a son. That's why I couldn't die. I had to survive, and get out. survived to stand right in front of them, and make them see how the very son they destroyed with their own hands, managed to come back alive. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a message from that unknown number. "Log what happened tonight." I texted back, "Already logged it." "Good, keep observing." I put the phone down and closed my eyes. The doctor was right. I am her masterpiece. She molded me with her own 2 hands. Without her, I wouldn't be who I am today. But sometimes, I still wonder. If I hadn't met her back then, what would I be like today? I'd probably be dead, rotting away in that room with 4 white walls. Dead from the day after day electroshocks and solitary confinement. Dead from that suffocating, endless despair. So, I really should thank her. Even if her methods were a bit terrifying. But she kept me alive. And that's all that matters. Observation log, end of day 4. Noise level, high. Emotional fluctuation, none. The morning after the cops left, the butler knocked on my door. He said Mr. Joe and CEO Joe were waiting for me in the study. I changed into that faded, washed-out gray shirt, buttoning it tight all the way to the top. As I walked downstairs, the living room was dead silent. My mom was sitting on the couch, her eyes swollen like peaches from crying. Seeing me come down, her lips moved. She looked like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I just ignored her, and walked straight to the study. The door was left open. My dad was sitting behind his massive rosewood desk, while Joe Chingyue stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. This was the absolute center of power in the Joe family. In the past, just stepping foot in this room was enough to make my palms sweat with anxiety. I used to walk on eggshells, constantly reading their faces. Terrified of saying the wrong thing and pissing them off. Terrified they'd tell me I wasn't as well behaved as Joe Ming. But now, I just thought the soundproofing in here was actually pretty good. I walked in, pulled out the chair across from the desk, and sat down. I kept my movements light, making sure the chair didn't scrape against the floor. My dad stared at me, his eyebrows pulled into a tight frown. He was a man who cared deeply about his reputation, completely used to having total control over everything. The cops showing up last night had finally made him realize one thing. His old family punishments wouldn't work on me anymore. So, he switched gears to a businessman's negotiation tactic. Joe Chingyue walked over and slammed a thick stack of documents down in front of me. The pages fanned out. Right on top, the header read, Non-Disclosure Agreement and Declaration of Renunciation of Inheritance. "Take a look," Joe Chingyue said, her voice freezing cold. She had that usual condescending sneer. "As long as you sign these papers, promise to keep your mouth shut to the public, and promise never to lay a finger on Joe Ming again. You can collect a monthly allowance of 500,000 from the family trust fund. You can go right back to being the comfortable little young master of the Joe family. But only if you learn to behave." I looked down at the papers. The pages were packed with dense, tiny print, and every single clause was a restriction on me. I couldn't breathe a word about being sent to that reform school 3 years ago. I couldn't do anything to damage the reputation of the Joe family or Joe Ming. And I had to voluntarily surrender all my shares and inheritance rights to the Joe Group. The penalty for breaching the contract was astronomical. My dad picked up his teacup and took a slow sip. "Ting Ting, it's not that there's no place for you in this house," he started. "But the stunt you pulled last night was completely out of line. Your eldest sister and I have talked it over. As long as you sign this, we're willing to let bygones be bygones. We're doing this for your own good. It'll keep you from going down the wrong path again." For your own good, what an incredibly convenient excuse. 3 years ago, they used those exact words when they shoved me into that car. And locked me away in that hellhole where I never saw the light of day. And now, they were using the same tired line again, trying to buy my silence for the rest of my miserable life. I didn't get angry. I didn't even feel a twinge of heartbreak. I simply reached out, picked up a pen from the desk, and pulled off the cap. Seeing how cooperative I was being, Joe Chingyue let out a mocking little smirk. "At least you know what's good for you. If we'd known money was all it took, things wouldn't have gotten so ugly 3 years ago." "I can sign it," I said softly. My voice was dead flat, completely devoid of emotion. "But the rights and obligations in this agreement are completely one-sided. I need to add a supplementary clause." My dad set his teacup down, his eyes suddenly sharp. "What exactly do you want to add? Is the money not enough for you?" Joe Chingyue scoffed. I just shook my head, holding the pen over the blank space at the end of the contract. I slowly wrote down a single line, word by word. My handwriting was so impossibly neat, it looked exactly like printed bold text. When I was done, I spun the document around and slid it right back across the desk to them. I agree to give up my inheritance. I agree to keep my mouth shut. But in exchange, I demand to keep my right to press charges for the illegal detention and psychological abuse from 3 years ago. The study instantly fell dead silent. My dad's face completely drained of color. Jo Qingyue slammed her hand on the desk, pointed right at my face, and screamed, "Are you out of your damn mind? Press charges? You want to sue us?" I stared coldly at her jawline. My therapist said right and wrong aren't about feelings. They are about behavioral evidence. You want to use a contract to control my actions now. So I am going to use the law to make you pay for your past actions. That is called an equal exchange. My dad jumped up from his chair. I am your biological father. Your oldest sister is your own flesh and blood. And now you want to settle the score with us? Are you completely heartless? His voice was so loud. It rattled the lids on the teacups. I just sat there in my chair, without even blinking an eye. Yes, I am going to settle the score with you. I looked right at my dad. Because my therapist said, loving yourself is the #1 rule. I will never back down for anyone's tears or family ties ever again. Stop making a scene. Jo Qingyue was trembling with rage. Who do you think you are? What proof do you have to sue us? Those exact words. Stop making a scene. Perfectly triggered my system programming. I wasn't even angry. I actually felt the temperature inside my body dropping rapidly. I stood up, adjusted my shirt cuffs, and spoke with an unprecedented politeness. Director Joe, do you want me to be reasonable? Or do you want me to just keep taking your abuse? What makes you think I still need you to believe me? I looked at their shocked, alienated expressions, and gently placed the pen on the desk. I am not explaining myself. Explanations are for people who actually care. Since we can't reach an agreement, then the deal is off. I am not signing it. What you owe me isn't an apology, and it is not money. It is consequences. I turned around and walked toward the study door. Behind me, my dad and Jo Qingyue were staring daggers at my back. For the first time, they realized I was no longer that son who would cry and beg for mercy over a single harsh word. I had become a machine, operating strictly on programming. A monster they could no longer control. I pulled open the study door. Outside, Zhou Ming was standing right there in the hallway. He was holding a plate of sliced fruit, his face as pale as a ghost. He had clearly been eavesdropping for a while. The moment he saw me come out, he instinctively took a huge step back, dropping a silver fork from the fruit plate onto the carpet. He looked at me, and his eyes had completely lost that arrogant provocation and fake innocence from yesterday. There was nothing left but pure, naked panic. In the past, all he had to do was fake an illness and shed a few tears. And he could trigger my anger, making me lose my mind. Then, he would use my family to trample me under his feet, time and time again. But now, he realized, I wasn't begging for love anymore. I wasn't fighting for their favor anymore. I was even willing to throw away my inheritance to the Joe Group. And all of their money. I was a madman, who wanted absolutely nothing. There's no way I can be guilt-tripped now. I stopped in my tracks, and glanced at the fork dropped on the floor. Mr. Joe, I called out to him. Zhou Ming trembled all over. Brother, you can keep up the act. I leaned in slightly, and told him in an incredibly steady voice. But I'd suggest next time you pull a dirty trick, you wipe the evidence a little cleaner. Because the moment I catch you, I will send you to that place, and make you relive my 3 years all over again. Zhou Ming's legs gave out, his back pressing dead against the wall. He couldn't even stammer out a single coherent reply. I straightened up, walked right past him, went back to my room, and pulled out that old phone. I opened the Notes app. Observation log, Day 5. Negotiations broke down, refused to sign the unfair treaty. Test results. They just want an obedient son. While all I need is a fair courtroom. Addendum. Target subject, Zhou Ming, has developed extreme fear. The doctor said this is a good sign. Back in my room, I stood by the window looking down at the garden. Zhou Ming was still standing frozen in the hallway. I could hear his heavy, ragged breathing. He must be genuinely terrified. After all, for all these years, he had never seen me react like this. The old me was like a tamed dog, too scared to bite no matter how badly I was abused. But the current me has already died once. And someone who has died once fears nothing. My mind suddenly drifted back to my days in the correction center. Back then, I had just been sent in. I didn't know the rules yet. I was punished every single day. Locked in solitary confinement every single day. One time, I was shocked until I passed out. When I woke up, I found myself lying on the floor. My mouth full of blood. I had bitten through my own tongue. Someone was sitting next to me, wearing a white lab coat and gold-rimmed glasses with a completely blank expression. "You're awake?" she asked. I just stared at her, unable to speak. "My name is Wei Yuru. I'm the doctor here," she said. "From today on, you are under my watch." I thought she was there to save me, but I later found out she was there to remake me. She said I was too weak, too easily hurt, too easily manipulated. She said I needed to find a new way to live, how to change. She taught me those rules, one by one. Don't trust anyone, only trust the rules. Only trust the evidence, only trust yourself. At first, I just couldn't learn. I cried all the time. I was always homesick, always dreaming that one day, Mom and Dad would come rescue me. Later, she stopped teaching me, left me to figure it out on my own. She put a mirror in the solitary cell, and made me stare at my own reflection. 2 days, 3 days, I stared at myself in the mirror. From crying, to not crying. From breaking down, to being completely calm. And then, I understood. Mom and Dad weren't coming. No one was coming to save me. The only one who could save me, was myself. From that day on, I changed. No more crying, no more begging. I swore that the day I got out, I would make every single one of them taste the exact same suffering I did. And now, I'm out. Observation log, day 5 concluded. Target's fear level is escalating. Emotional fluctuations, 0. The very next morning, I decided to go out. Not for a walk, but to the company. The Joe Group headquarters, those twin towers, are the landmarks of this city. 3 years ago, I was an intern there. Back then, I thought that if I just worked hard enough, I could close the gap between me and Joe Ming in our parents' eyes. Instead, I was handcuffed in front of everyone, dragged into a car, and thrown into that correction center. Today, I wanted to go back. Not for anything crazy, just to get back the personal things I left behind. My doctor said that reclaiming what belongs to you is a crucial part of rebuilding your own boundaries. I didn't tell a soul. Just took a cab by myself. When I stepped out, the sun was blindingly harsh. Carrying my faded canvas bag, I walked right up to the main entrance. Hold it right there. The security guard blocked my way. He looked me up and down, staring at my worn-out shirt. With pure, unfiltered disgust. Salesman to the back door. This is the main entrance. I stopped in my tracks and glanced at his name tag. I'm not selling anything. My voice was incredibly soft and completely steady. I'm here to see Joe Qingyue. The guard reacted like he just heard the punchline of a joke. He scoffed. You want to see CEO Joe? Who the hell are you? Do you even have an appointment? No, I answered honestly, but I do have this. I pulled a document out of my bag. It was a copy of the resignation agreement I signed 3 years ago. It even had the Joe Group's official seal on it. I just want to get back the personal things I left in my office. Get lost. Who are you trying to fool with that piece of trash? The guard shoved me impatiently. He pushed hard. My frail, skinny frame staggered, and I stumbled back a couple of steps. Employees passing by started gathering around in small groups, whispering and pointing fingers. Wait, isn't that the biological son of the Joe family? Keep your voice down. I heard he went crazy and had to be locked up for a few years. Young Master Joe Ming sent out a memo just this morning. He said his brother was emotionally unstable right now, and asked us all to be patient if we ran into him at work. Oh, so that's what's going on. Joe Ming had already dug my grave before I even arrived. He used his sickeningly sweet tone to permanently brand me as a complete lunatic in everyone's eyes. I looked at the guard, then looked at the crowd of onlookers. Their eyes were full of pity, full of mockery, but absolutely zero respect. Mr. Joe, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. Right now. The guard stepped forward again, trying to forcefully drag me out to the curb. CEO Joe made it very clear that mentally unstable people like you stay away from the lobby. His hand gripped my arm. It hurt a lot, but I didn't struggle. The doctor told me, when someone uses unlawful physical force against you, the best counterattack isn't violence, it's transparency. I freed one hand, pulled out my old phone, and started a live stream. Immediately, I pointed the camera at the massive Joe Corporation logo, and then at the security guard's arrogant face. Everyone, I spoke into the camera, my voice as calm as if I were reading the news. I am Zhou Ting, the biological son of the Zhou family who went missing 3 years ago. Today, I returned to the Zhou Corporation to pack up my personal belongings. But I was stopped by this security guard. His excuse? CEO Zhou gave the order. Claiming I'm mentally unstable, the guard froze. The crowd around us erupted in whispers, and the viewer count in the livestream began to skyrocket. The Zhou family's messy drama was always a hot topic in this city. Now, I'd like to ask this guard a question. I aimed the camera right at him, my eyes dead and unblinking. What is your legal basis for diagnosing me as mentally unstable? Do you have a professional psychiatric evaluation? Or just CEO Zhou's empty words? The guard was completely speechless. He lunged forward to grab my phone. Put that phone down. Stop filming. I stepped aside, dodging him effortlessly. Then, I held up my ID card to the camera. If I really am crazy, then show me the restraining order. If you don't have one, then your actions right now are considered harassment and violent obstruction of a citizen's legal rights. Are you out of your mind? The guard snapped, humiliated and furious. Yes, you're the one who said I'm sick, I replied calmly, sweeping my gaze across the watching crowd. So, I'm just following my doctor's orders. Since you've all labeled me a lunatic, then whatever a lunatic does should be forgiven, right? I took a step forward, slamming my shoulder hard right into his chest. My bones were solid, hitting him hard enough to make him wince. But he didn't dare fight back. Because the camera was pointed right at his face. Because there were already tens of thousands of people watching the stream. Zhou Ting, haven't you caused enough of a scene? A sharp, commanding woman's voice echoed from inside the lobby. Zhou Qingyue, striding in her red-soled heels, marched out aggressively with a swarm of executives trailing right behind her. She glared at the crowd and my phone, her face turning a livid shade of purple. Turn it off, shut down that livestream right now. She stormed up to me and hissed, her voice dripping with absolute authority. I stared back at her perfectly manicured face. CEO Zhou, I refused to call her my sister. I'm not causing a scene. I'm just settling our accounts. 3 years ago, right here in this spot, you publicly announced I stole 100 million, and you threw me out. Now, 3 years later, right here in this spot, you publicly declare I'm insane. And order them to block my path. I turned the camera directly onto her face. My voice cold and deadpan. You stripped away my reputation. And now you want to strip away my basic freedom of movement. What makes you think? You think I'd still listen to you? Zhou Qingyue was trembling with rage. She raised her hand, like she was about to slap me across the face. I didn't flinch, I just stared straight into the camera. The doctors said, if you want me gone, the best way is to just kill me. And if you can't kill me, then you'd better learn to play by my rules. Zhou Qingyue's hand froze in midair. She saw the live stream, completely flooded with comments saying, CEO Zhou bullies her own brother. The Zhou family is disgusting. Seeing those comments, it finally dawned on her. That obedient little Zhou Ting she could easily control, had already died inside that reform school. Zhou Ting, you've disappointed me so much. She pulled her hand back, her voice completely icy. Pulling a stunt like this, other than humiliating our family, what exactly do you gain? I threw the question right back at her. Giving a soft laugh, I said, I don't want to gain anything. I just want you to hurt. CEO Zhou, do you want me to be reasonable? Or do you just want me to keep being your punching bag? Zhou Qingyue gritted her teeth, glaring daggers at me. But she couldn't utter a single word. Just then, a black Bentley pulled up by the curb. My second sister, Zhou Rushao, that senior lawyer, wearing an impeccably tailored suit, pushed the door open and stepped out. She took in the scene, her eyes filled with clinical, professional scrutiny. That's enough. She walked over. Her tone actually carried a hint of gentle persuasion. I'm a lawyer, and I'm also your sister. Your current mental state really isn't fit for the public eye. Come with me, let's go to the hospital and get you a comprehensive evaluation. Okay? She was trying to use her professional jargon to diagnose me as crazy. I looked at her, and turned off the live stream, because I knew what I was about to say next. Didn't need an audience. Second sister, I addressed her with cold politeness. Since you're a lawyer, please show me your power of attorney right now. If you can't, then back off. Otherwise, what you owe me will be a hell of a lot more than just an apology. As my second sister Zhou Rushao stood before me, the air around us seemed to freeze completely. She was elegant as ever. Not a single wrinkle on her crisp suit. Looking at me with that condescending, pitiful gaze. I knew that look way too well. 3 years ago, she looked at me exactly like that, watching me thrash around while pinned to the floor, as she analyzed my so-called criminal psychology word by word. Ting ting, if you're done throwing a tantrum, get in the car. Her voice was sickeningly soft, like she was coaxing a disobedient toddler. Your mood swings are way beyond normal levels right now. You need professional help. She turned and shot Zhou Qingyue a reassuring glance, then looked back at me. As your family, we have a legal responsibility to act as your guardians. Be a good boy. Don't make things any uglier than they already are. Guardians? Hearing that word slip from her mouth, it reeked of rotting medicine. I stared straight at the gold-rimmed glasses resting on the bridge of her nose. Behind those glasses, there was no sisterly affection in her eyes, only cold calculation. She wanted to use her professional status to lock me back inside a psychiatric cage. My therapist once told me, when someone tries to define you using fake authority, you don't just argue back, you expose them. I took a small step back, creating a clear physical distance between us. Second sister, I called out to her softly. My voice was dead calm, without a single ripple of emotion. In what capacity? Are you speaking to me right now? Second sister froze for a second, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. I'm your older sister, of course. If you're speaking as my sister. Then drop the clinical jargon. I stared dead at her jawline. My words were quiet but sharp. But if you're speaking as a lawyer, then please show me your credentials and Mr. Joe's formal power of attorney. Otherwise, this little diagnosis you're giving me isn't just procedurally baseless, it's outright defamation. Second sister's face visibly stiffened. She clearly didn't expect me to use her own professional logic to shut her up. Ting ting, do you really have to be so hostile? We're just doing this for your own good. For my own good? I cut her off. The corners of my mouth curled up slightly, but my eyes remained dead. 3 years ago, under the disguise of, for my own good, you submitted a fake psychological report to the court, crushing my last chance of survival. And now, you're using, for my own good, again, to lock me up in another psych ward? I took a step closer, glaring right through her glasses. Are you my doctor, or just their little tool? Second sister subconsciously avoided my gaze, her voice dropping lower. Zhou Ting, you're being way too paranoid. This is classic persecution paranoia. Every single bit of resistance from you right now just proves that you desperately need treatment. Proves? I threw the word back at her. My therapist said right and wrong aren't based on feelings. They're based on concrete evidence. I pulled out my phone and tapped open a legal document I had downloaded while waiting earlier. According to the Mental Health Act, forced medical treatment against a person's will is highly illegal. Second sister, you're a big shot lawyer. You should know this better than I do. If you forcefully drag me away today, I will use this as evidence to sue you and get your precious law license permanently revoked. Second sister's pupils sharply contracted. The thing she cared about most in this world was her flawless professional facade. I caught a flash of humiliated rage in her eyes. You are absolutely hopeless. She finally let her gentle, fake mask slip, her voice screeching into the air. Zhou Ting, you think memorizing a few legal statutes means you can just flip the world upside down? That's selfish, vile rot in your bones. It will never change. Never change. Those words felt like a long, thin steel needle, stabbing perfectly into my deepest scar. The temperature in my eyes instantly plummeted. All the surrounding noise seemed to completely fade away, leaving behind nothing but a dead, chilling silence. You're exactly right. I stared dead at her, my tone becoming more polite than it had ever been. Almost chillingly formal. I really can't change. I can't change the memory of my own flesh and blood, shoving me straight into the abyss 3 years ago. And I can't just turn off the instincts I learned in that hellhole, where I had to calculate every single move, every single minute, just to stay alive. I turned my back, completely ignoring the utter shock written all over her face. Lawyer Joe, I suggest you go back and dig through the case files. Take a good look at how the little brother who begged you to believe him 3 years ago slowly died inside. The person standing in front of you now doesn't need your diagnosis, and I sure as hell don't need your saving. My second sister stood frozen in place, her hands gripping her briefcase in a death choke. Her knuckles were turning white from the force. She wanted to argue back, wanted to crush me with her flawless logic, but she realized I wasn't even playing her game. I was like a block of freezing ice. No matter what kind of fiery words she used to try and thaw me out. All she got back was an even more piercing chill. "Zhou Ting, you stop right there." Zhou Qingyue screamed from behind me, but I didn't stop. My doctor said that walking away from the source of the noise is a highly effective way to keep your sanity intact. Clutching my canvas bag, I vanished into the reflection of the revolving doors at the Zhou Corporation. But I didn't actually leave the building. I pivoted and stepped into the staff elevator on the side of the first floor. I hit the button for the 18th floor, the financial center. It was also the place where I interned 3 years ago. I never finished my resignation paperwork, and I had left a personal notebook behind. The doctor told me that taking back what belongs to you is the very first step in rebuilding your personal boundaries. When the elevator doors slid open, the 18th floor hallway was a chaotic mess. The massive, fully transparent conference room was packed with people. There were board directors, an external audit team, and a few suppliers looking absolutely furious. Zhou Qingyue was sitting at the head of the table, rubbing her temples. My second sister hadn't come up after me. She was probably still downstairs, trying to pull herself together. Meanwhile, Zhou Ming was standing right next to Zhou Qingyue, holding a financial report, playing the part of the obedient, reliable golden boy stepping up in a crisis. I walked up to the conference room and pushed the glass door open. It wasn't loud, but everyone instantly stopped bickering, and their eyes snapped right to me. The moment Zhou Qingyue saw me, her face darkened completely. "What the hell are you doing up here? Are the security guards dead or something?" Just as she was about to call someone to drag me out, one of the major suppliers across the table slammed his hand down hard. "President Zhou, that's your family drama. We are here today to collect our money. That 100 million financial black hole from 3 years ago. You still can't give us a reasonable explanation for it. Because of that, the books still won't balance. We have no way to explain this to our bosses." 100 million. The moment that number dropped, the air in the conference room instantly froze over. 3 years ago, it was exactly this mysterious, vanished 100 million. That became the death warrant sending me to that hellish correctional facility. I was interning in the finance department back then, and so was Zhou Ming. The final investigation claimed that my employee ID logged into the system and transferred the funds. And the money? Funneled right into an overseas shell account. I couldn't defend myself no matter what I said. Right at that moment, Zhou Ming turned his head and looked straight at me. A flash of pure manipulation crossed his eyes, before he instantly slapped on a heartbroken, agonizing look. "Mr. Zhang, you know the whole story behind this missing money." Zhou Ming sighed heavily at the supplier. His voice wasn't too loud, nor too soft, but pitched perfectly so the entire room could hear him. Back then, it was my older brother, Zhou Ting, right here. He was young and foolish, got hooked on gambling and embezzled the money behind our backs. My eldest sister made the tough call to put justice first, and send her away for rehabilitation. She just got out today, so she's a bit emotionally unstable. Please, just give us a few days grace for the sake of the Zhou family. We will balance the books. His words were absolutely flawless. Not only did he smooth things over with the suppliers, but in front of everyone, he permanently pinned all the blame from back then right onto my back. He even conveniently explained away why I showed up here today. Because I'm just a criminal who recently got out. The board members looked at me, their eyes instantly filled with absolute disgust. If this were 3 years ago, facing such a public accusation, my eyes would have instantly welled up with tears. I would have rushed up, grabbed Zhou Ming by the collar, and screamed at him for slandering me. I would have sworn to everyone, completely panicking, that I never even touched that approval system. And then, I would be permanently labeled as a pathological liar and a total psycho. But right now, I just stood by the door. I even casually pulled up a chair, and quietly sat down. "Mr. Zhou." I stared right at Zhou Ming's jawline, my voice completely deadpan. "What makes you think I'm still the exact same person I was back then? That I'll just stand here crying and begging for justice?" Zhou Ming froze for a second. He was so used to my hysterical breakdowns. He wasn't used to me being this quiet. "Stop making a scene," he managed to squeeze out a bitter smile. "You signed the papers back then, and the security cameras caught you going into the server room. Those are cold hard facts. You say I'm crazy?" I completely ignored his little emotional act, and cut right to the chase. "Then I'll just follow my doctor's orders. My doctor told me that any lie made up by a human being will always leave an information gap. I dropped my faded canvas bag onto the table, unzipped it, pulled out an old flash drive, and gently slid it right to the center of the table. Since all the audit experts are gathered here today, let's make a little wager. I looked up, letting my eyes sweep across every single person in the room. I demand that we pull up the original payment chain for that 100 million fund from back then. The authorization chain and the backend system logs. Zhou Qingyue abruptly slammed her hands on the table and stood up. Zhou Ting, how long are you going to keep embarrassing us? That case was closed a long time ago. That case was closed by your precious Zhou family. I stared back at her. My voice soft, but leaving absolutely no room for argument. I'm not here to explain myself. Explanations are only for people who actually care. What I want right now is to settle the score, right here, right now. I pointed at the flash drive. 3 years ago, I didn't have the clearance to look into this. But over the past 3 years, I taught myself how to read code. Zhou Ming claims that I signed the papers. That's because the transfer required 2 digital keys. One belonged to the chief financial officer, and the other belonged to me, the account handler. The conference room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The auditor's professional instincts were instantly triggered. They all stared at me. I locked eyes with Zhou Ming. Fine beads of sweat were already starting to form on his forehead. But the system logs do not lie. The exact time those funds were transferred out was at 2:14 am. All you have to do is check. If you trace the IP addresses that logged in with those 2 digital keys back then, you'll find something very interesting. My voice was whisper soft, like I was telling a bedtime story. Both keys were logged into from the exact same computer, and the router MAC address tied to that IP didn't belong to the company server room. It belonged to the private apartment registered under Zhou Ming. As soon as I finished speaking, the entire room erupted in an uproar. Several external auditors immediately opened their laptops, their fingers flying across the keyboards. If what I'm saying is true, then it means that back then, someone sitting in their own apartment stole both the director's key and mine, and authorized that transfer. Zhou Ming's face instantly drained of color. He stared dead at the table, his lips starting to tremble. You're lying. This is pure slander. Whether it's slander or not, we'll know as soon as they check. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands over my lap. My doctor always said, right and wrong aren't about feelings. They're about hard evidence. 3 minutes later, the lead auditor looked up. Looking incredibly grim, he turned to Zhou Qingyue. Ms. Zhou, Mr. Zhou Ting is telling the truth. The underlying archived logs show that the IP address used back then really wasn't at the company. According to the network provider's records, it definitely belonged to Mr. Zhou Ming's apartment. All the air seemed to be instantly sucked right out of the room. Every single gaze snapped away from me and locked onto Zhou Ming. Zhou Ming's legs gave out, and he collapsed back into his chair. His proud little victim mask, his flawless web of lies, shattered to pieces against the cold, hard data. Sis, no, it's not. I didn't do it. Someone must have hacked my network. He frantically grabbed at Zhou Qingyu's sleeve. She just stood there, frozen. She looked at the data on the auditor's screen, and then down at Zhou Ming, whose face was dripping with cold sweat. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were swirling with absolute shock, and a hint of sheer panic that was finally breaking the surface. It suddenly hit her. 3 years ago, she had personally taken her innocent, blood-related brother and thrown him right into that man-eating hell. She had ruined my entire life. The conference room was dead silent. Zhou Qingyu's body was trembling slightly. She clenched her jaw so hard, and her eyes actually turned red. If she had the logic of a normal human being, she would have apologized to me right then. She would have hugged me, crying her eyes out, begging for my forgiveness. But this was Zhou Qingyue. She was the matriarch of the Zhou family, a woman who valued her pride and results more than her own life. And even in the face of all this, Zhou Qingyue took a deep breath, forcing herself to maintain that high and mighty posture. But her voice gave her away, trembling as she spoke. Even if you didn't transfer the money, did you really have to make such a huge scene in front of all these outsiders today? Do you have any idea how much this is going to damage the Zhou family's reputation? Even if you were wronged, couldn't you have just talked to me in private? Are you only happy when you've completely humiliated me? She hadn't changed at all, no matter what the actual truth was, as long as it hurt her own interests. Then it was my fault. I listened to her completely twisted logic. and didn't feel a single ripple of emotion in my heart. I just stood up. I picked up the flash drive from the table and slipped it back into my canvas bag. Then I walked right up to her. She thought I would accuse her, that I would be furious, but I just gave her a simple statement. Director Joe, my voice was colder than usual, and far more polite. What you owe me isn't an apology. It's consequences. Today is just the beginning. From today on, as far as I'm concerned, you are no longer family. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked out the door without looking back. As I pulled the glass doors open, I heard the sound of Jo Chingyue slumping back into her chair behind me. Along with the board members' hushed interrogations, none of that mattered to me anymore. Reaching the elevators, I pulled out my old phone, opened the Notes app, and typed, "Observation log, day 8. Information gap breached. Zhou Ming has lost his foundation of trust. Target subject, Jo Chingyue, is experiencing a cognitive collapse, but refuses to admit her mistakes. The doctor always said, people who refuse to admit their faults will face even harsher punishments from the rules." I stared at the screen and typed the final line. The punishment begins. By the time I walked out of the company gates, it was already dark outside. I stood by the side of the road, watching the endless stream of cars passing by. I felt surprisingly calm. I had been putting on that act for 3 years. From the very first day I walked in, I started gathering evidence. I started analyzing every single one of Zhou Ming's flaws. I knew he was bound to leave a trail, because greedy people can never keep their hands clean. I waited 3 long years for this day, and today, it finally arrived. But to be completely honest, it didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. I thought that the moment the truth was revealed, I would laugh out loud. That I'd feel a rush of triumph, and that I'd finally feel like I could breathe again. But when the moment actually came, I felt absolutely nothing. It just felt like crossing off a scheduled task, nothing more. My phone buzzed. It was a message from that specific number. Well done. I stared at that message, and the corners of my mouth twitched into something like a smile. Yeah, I did well, but what now? What was I supposed to do next? I had no idea. The doctor said that after the reckoning comes a new beginning, but I couldn't even picture what a new beginning looked like. Forget it, I'm not going to think about it. I'll just head back first. Observation log, day 8, concluded. Task completion, 80%. Emotional fluctuation, none. By the time I arrived back at the Zhou family villa, it was almost completely dark. The moment I walked through the door, I caught a whiff of a familiar, long-lost aroma. It was sweet and sour mandarin fish. When I was 8, right after the Zhou family finally brought me home, I was dark and scrawny from malnutrition. My mother had personally cooked this exact dish for me. Back then, she told me, "Ting Ting, from now on, this is your home. Mom will make up for everything she owes you." I actually believed that, but what I got in return was 3 years of pure hell, and countless times of hearing, "You really disappoint, Mom." Ting Ting, you're home. My mother ran out of the kitchen in her apron, wearing this cautious, eager to please smile. My third sister, Jo Yui, was sitting on the couch, holding several designer shopping bags. "Ting Ting, come look, your sister got you some new clothes, and a laptop from that brand you always loved." Jo Yui walked over and reached out to grab my arm. I gently stepped aside to avoid her touch. But that slight movement opened up a massive abyss between us. "Mrs. Zhou, Ms. Zhou." I stared right at them. My voice was completely flat, without a single trace of emotion. My doctor said that unprovoked kindness usually stems from a guilt-driven need to overcompensate. What you are doing right now is disrupting my peace. My mother's smile completely froze. Her eyes instantly welled up with tears. "Ting Ting, Mom knows she was wrong. Qingyue came back from the office this afternoon and told us everything. You really didn't take that 100 million back then. It was Xiao Ming." She choked on a sob and tried to pull me into a hug. "Mom has been miserable these past few years too. I just want to make it up to you. Please, just give Mom another chance, okay?" I looked at her. Her tears were real. Her guilt seemed real, too. But my heart was like a frozen lake. Not a single ripple. "Make it up to me?" I walked over to the dining table and looked at the steaming plate of sweet and sour fish. 3 years ago, when Zhou Ming said I stole the money, you slapped me right across the face in front of everyone. You said the Zhou family didn't breed thieves like me. 2 years ago, when I was thrown into solitary confinement for refusing to admit I was sick, I wrote you a letter begging you to get me out. You wrote back, telling me to behave and stop bringing shame to the family. 1 year ago, when I fought against taking those pills, they hit me with electroshocks. I was in a coma for 3 days. CEO Joe came to see me, and you made her pass on a message. You said that as long as I was a good, obedient girl, there would still be a place for me in the Joe family. With every word I spoke, my mother's face grew paler and paler. By the end of it, she could barely stand, clinging to the table as she completely broke down in tears. Stop, Ting Ting, please, I'm begging you, stop. No, I'm going to finish. I pulled out a chair and sat down, calmly taking out my phone. I opened a document. My doctor told me, family bonds aren't maintained by blood. They are calculated by actions. This is my ledger for the past 3 years. I pushed the phone to the center of the table. 3 years of false imprisonment. 1,095 days in total. Various physical injuries. 34 of them in total. The stripping away of my right to an education, my right to socialize, and my basic human dignity. If we convert all of that into a number, I looked up at them, my eyes perfectly clear and entirely void of emotion. But it's so cold it makes me shiver. And now you guys think one single meal, a few pieces of clothing, and one pathetic, overdue apology is going to wipe the slate clean? What on earth makes you think I still need your love? Joe Yui stared at the records on my phone. Every single ounce of agony I wrote down, word by word. She just covered her mouth and bolted for the bathroom. The sound of her throwing up echoed down the hall. My mother slumped to the floor, clutching at my pant leg, sobbing like her heart was being ripped out. Mommy is so sorry. I never wanted to send you away to that place. It was Qingyue who said they could cure your lying. And Zhao Ming swore he saw you hanging out with delinquents at school. I wasn't picking sides, Ting Ting. I swear, I just wanted to keep this family stable. Stable. I repeated the word out loud, a bitter smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. So, for the sake of your stability, you just liquidated me like a toxic acid. I leaned down, staring dead into my mother's eyes, my voice colder and more polite than it had ever been. Mrs. Joe, I want you to say it to my face. 3 years ago, when you signed those papers to lock me up in that correction center, did you really think that if I just disappeared, the Joe family could go right back to playing perfect, happy families? My mother's mouth hung open, her face drenched in tears, but she couldn't choke out a single word. The pure terror in her eyes gave me my answer. Yes, even back then, she saw me as a stain. A filthy stain ruining her picture-perfect family. I didn't bother explaining myself. Explanations are only for people who actually give a damn. I stood up and grabbed my canvas bag. Save that plate of fish for Joe Ming. I'm sure he could use some warm, home-cooked comfort to calm his nerves right now. I headed upstairs. My mother was screaming my name, crying hysterically behind me. But I didn't even look back. The doctor always said, once you sever your attachments, you sever the root of your pain. Back in my room, I sat alone in the pitch black. The wailing downstairs still hadn't stopped. That was just them paying the emotional toll for their own guilt. I pulled out my old phone and opened the Notes app. Observation log, day 9. The family ledger has been exposed. Enemy defenses have completely collapsed. Target, Mrs. Joe, is experiencing extreme psychological distress. But like the doctor said, this kind of guilt only happens because the ugly truth got dragged into the light. If the truth had stayed buried, they'd still look at me as the rotten child of the family. I stared out the window. The lights in the Joe family garden flickered on, illuminating the perfectly manicured hedges. It was Joe Ming's absolute favorite view. With dead eyes, I typed out one final line. Family ties, terminated. The audit continues. I was just about to get some sleep, when my phone suddenly buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was short, just one line. Mr. Joe, it seems you have finally learned how to be a proper auditor. I am so very proud of you. My grip on the phone tightened. It was her, the very same doctor from the correction center. The woman who had personally crushed me to pieces, and molded me back together into the monster I am today. I stared at those words on the screen for a long time. Honestly, I had no clue how to even reply. She had actually praised me. I'm supposed to be happy about that. But deep down, I felt absolutely nothing at all. Right at that moment, Joe Ming's scream echoed from downstairs, along with the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. It seems, my mom's belated guilt has finally caught up to Joe Ming. But I know him. Joe Ming won't just sit around and wait. He's definitely going to use public opinion for one last, desperate counterattack. Observation log, day 9, completed. External interference has increased. Emotional fluctuation. 0. First thing the next morning. Joe Ming's counterattack hit. It was faster than I expected. And far sloppier than I imagined. Half an hour ago, several local anonymous forums and short video platforms completely blew up at the exact same time. The headlines were pure clickbait. Wealthy biological son returns as a demon. Violently beats adopted brother. Drives own mother insane. In the video, the camera footage is incredibly shaky. My mother, slumped on the floor and sobbing, was dramatically slowed down. Paired with some tragic background music. And then, there's Joe Ming's face. He was turned slightly away from the lens, half of his face completely red and swollen. His eyes were totally filled with terror and grievance. Down in the comments, people were having a field day. Sending scum like him to a reform school for 3 years wasn't enough. He should be locked up for life. The Joe family really raised a backstabbing monster. Who cares if he's blood? If you're rotten to the core, there's no saving you. I feel so bad for poor little Ming. He's done so much for the Joe family these past 3 years, and now some lunatic comes back to steal the inheritance. I stared at those words. To me, they were just gusts of meaningless wind. That could never reach my heart. The doctor said that public opinion is just cheap bullets. That only hit people who actually care about their reputation. And me? I have no reputation. I only have evidence. Suddenly, my bedroom door was shoved open. Zhou Qingyue stomped in with heavy footsteps, gripping a tablet in her hand. She looked absolutely livid, the veins on her forehead literally pulsing. Zhou Ting, is this what you wanted? She slammed the tablet onto my lap, pointing furiously at the trending searches on the screen. The board of directors' phones are blowing up. All our partners are asking if the Zhou family is harboring a lunatic. You've completely ruined the company's image. You need to go out there, apologize right now, and do damage control. She glared at me, her tone still dripping with that same bossy arrogance. Even though she already knew I was framed 3 years ago, in her eyes. The Zhou family's reputation will always come before my innocence. I picked up the tablet, swiped through it casually a couple of times. Director Zhou. I looked up at her, my eyes as dead and calm as stagnant water. Are you asking me to be reasonable, or are you just expecting me to keep taking the abuse? Zhou Qingyue completely froze. She never expected me to use the exact same words. She had been repeating for the past 2 days right back at her. I am telling you to apologize. This is for the greater good. She screamed. The greater good is your problem. I stood up and set the tablet down on the desk. I'm only here for my payback. I pulled out the old phone that held all my evidence, and plugged it into the computer. The doctor said, lying is bad, slandering is bad. Since Joe Ming loves using public opinion to destroy people, I guess I'll just have to teach him a lesson. This is what you call a solid chain of evidence. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The first video I uploaded was the complete, unedited footage from the living room that night. No edits, no dramatic music. It clearly showed exactly how Joe Ming provoked me, and how he verbally abused me. How he faked that fall, and my slap. The second file was the official police report receipt. It stated, in black and white, Zhou Ting reported the incident. The Zhou family is suspected of false imprisonment. The third, and the absolute most lethal one, was a screenshot of the company's backend logs from 3 years ago, along with an apology email draft that my second sister, Zhou Ruxiao, had just sent me. She was probably trying to do damage control. But little did she know, every single word she sent would become a weapon in my hands. Send. I shut my laptop, watching the screen fade to black. You're out of your mind. Zhou Qingyue stared at what I had just done, her voice trembling. You're going to completely destroy the Zhou family. I'm not the one destroying this family. I grabbed my bag, getting ready to leave. I told you, none of you are family to me anymore. I walked to the door, then turned back to look at her one last time. President Zhou, I can't give you the damage control you want. The only thing I can give you are the consequences of messing with me. I stepped out of the room. There, at the top of the stairs, stood Joe Ming, hiding in the shadows. He was staring at his phone, his expression twisting from smug arrogance to pure terror, and finally, into a face of twisted hatred. Zhou Ting, you think this means you win? He lunged at me through gritted teeth, trying to snatch my bag. I didn't flinch. I just shot out my hand, and locked it right around his throat. I squeezed hard. He wouldn't die, though. My doctor told me getting violent wasn't a good idea. I stared dead into his eyes, my voice as cold as ice. So, let me teach you one more time what the rules actually are. I slammed him hard against the wall. What you owe me can't be fixed with a simple apology. Now, the backlash is burning you alive. Downstairs, my mother's wailing echoed again. But this time, nobody went to comfort her. Because they were all too busy glued to their phones, watching the glamorous facade of the Joe family being ripped apart by my own two hands, piece by piece. I walked out the front doors of the Joe estate. The night air was freezing. Suddenly, my phone lit up. It was a text from that unknown number. Well done, but not ruthless enough. I pocketed my phone, staring at my own thin shadow under the streetlights. They were right, it wasn't enough. My doctor said, loving yourself is the #1 rule. And the best way to love myself is to make sure that anyone who ever hurt me loses the power to ever do it again. Observation log, day 10. The PR war has flipped. The Joe family's reputation is completely destroyed. Target Joe Ming is fully exposed. The Joe family tried to use guilt and blood ties to control me. But I don't care about family anymore. Like my doctor said, this is the necessary path to freedom. Early the next morning, the atmosphere in the Joe family villa was weird to the extreme. Joe Qingyue didn't go to the office. Second sister and third sister were both there. Even my dad, who usually kept to himself, was sitting in the main seat of the living room. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. Ting Ting, come here, my dad ordered. His tone carried an unquestionable sense of oppression. I walked to the center of the living room. Mr. Joe, I addressed him politely. My dad furrowed his brows tightly. What did you call me? The doctor said, titles should match our current relationship status. I looked at him calmly. I don't belong to this family anymore. You insolent brat. He slammed the table and shot up. Just then, Joe Ming's scream came from upstairs. He scrambled down the stairs, holding a stack of documents in his hand. His face was deathly pale, and his whole body was shaking. Sis, something happened. He slapped the documents onto the table, his fingertips trembling. The company's project department just called me. They said the bidding proposal for our core project has been leaked. The reserve price the rival company got is exactly the same as ours. Joe Qingyu's eyes instantly turned sharp. What? That's the Joe Group's most important $10 billion project this year. And Joe Ming slumped onto the sofa, covering his face and crying loudly. My personal seal that I kept in the safe, and the digital key that eldest sister authorized for me, they're both gone. All eyes instantly stabbed into me like knives. Joe Ting, you went into my room last night. Joe Ming looked up at me, his eyes full of panic. When I got up in the night, I saw you passing by my door, holding something in your hand. You're lying, third sister Joe Yui shouted instinctively, but she clearly lacked confidence. Joe Qingyue walked up to me. The last bit of guilt in her eyes vanished into thin air. How dare you sell out the company's core secrets? She closed in on me, her voice cold as ice. Joe Ting, are you really not going to be satisfied until you've completely destroyed the Joe family? My mom stood up too, her eyes filled with despair. Ting Ting, how could you do something like this? That's your father's life's work. Here we go again, this familiar blame. They don't even need evidence. As long as Joe Ming cries, I'm automatically the bad seed. You said I'm sick. I looked at Joe Qingyue. I suddenly let out a laugh, my voice very light. Then I'll just follow the doctor's treatment plan. I turned my head to look at Joe Ming. My tone was as gentle as a greeting. Mr. Joe, you said you saw me go into your room? Joe Ming gritted his teeth and nodded. At exactly 2 a.m. last night. And you said the seal and the digital key are missing? Yes, that's the lifeblood of the company. I nodded, taking out that old, faded phone from my canvas bag. My doctor says lying is bad. Slandering is bad, too. I pulled up a security video and cast it straight to the living room television. President Joe, Mr. Joe, you all should know by now, a psycho like me has a little habit. I have absolutely zero trust in my surroundings. On the screen, the little hallway outside my room was crystal clear. At 2 in the morning, my door never even budged. But, at 3 in the morning, a figure in silk pajamas crept out of Joe Ming's room, holding a black box, and shoved it right into the trash chute at the end of the hall. It was Joe Ming. The living room fell dead silent. Joe Ming's fake sobbing stopped instantly. He froze on the couch, his face turning from pale to completely green. You faked this. You psycho, you're trying to frame me. He shrieked, lunging at the television. I didn't stop him, I just hit play on an audio clip. Joe Ming's hushed voice came through. A conversation between him and some stranger. I've already disposed of the stuff. I'll email you the proposal. Transfer the rest of the cash to that offshore account. That scapegoat, Joe Ting, is never recovering from this. The audio was crystal clear. It even picked up his heavy, excited breathing. My father's clenched fists slowly relaxed. The rage in his eyes shifted into a dead, empty stare. Zhou Qingyue stared at the screen, her body swaying, barely keeping her balance. My second sister, Zhou Ruxiao, tried to defend him, but she looked like a duck getting strangled, unable to choke out a single syllable. What made you think I'd act like I used to? Just standing around crying and begging for justice? I looked at Zhou Ming, my eyes no longer darting away. I stared at him like he was a piece of actual garbage. My doctor says right and wrong aren't about feelings, they're about hard evidence. Mr. Zhou, when you leaked the proposal to our rivals, you forgot to check the voice recorder in your study. Oh, right, I left that recorder there on purpose. I put my phone away, looking at a room full of people who had just been brutally slapped in the face by the truth. President Zhou, Mr. Zhou, Mrs. Zhou, I called them out one by one, my tone dripping with unnatural politeness. The truth is right here. Every single accusation you threw at me earlier is going to cost you right now. My mother suddenly lunged forward to grab my hand. Ting Ting, Mom was wrong. He tricked me. I'm kicking him out right now. I pulled my hand away. You don't owe me an apology. You owe me consequences. I stared at the mother who used to swear up and down that she loved me, but always left me to face the fire alone. 3 years ago, when you all saw the truth, you chose to sacrifice me to keep the peace. Today, you see the truth again, and your first instinct is still to sweep it under the rug. I glanced at my father, who was just about to call the public relations department. He still wanted to bury the whole thing, to save the Zhou family's precious reputation, to protect Zhou Ming, this rotten, but publicly flawless golden boy. Well, starting today, you're no longer family to me. I grabbed my bag and headed for the front door. I've already leaked the proposal anonymously to the bidding regulators. The penalty fees and the ruined reputation the Zhou family will have to face is exactly what you all deserve. Zhou Ting, stop right there. My dad roared from behind me. I stopped and looked back. Do you want me to be reasonable? Or do you just want me to keep taking the abuse? I dropped the words coldly and pushed open the doors of the Zhou family home. The wind outside was howling. My phone buzzed. It was a short message. His cover is blown. Now you can finally cut off this dead weight for good. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance. I stared at the streetlights in the distance. The doctor said that loving yourself is the #1 rule. I've finally learned how to do that. Observation log, day 11. Frame up trap countered. Zhou Ming's true colors are fully exposed. The Zhou family attempts to cover up the truth once again. Failed. Family bond system completely shut down. The doctor told me I did a great job. Back in the living room of the Zhou family mansion, my dad sat at the head of the sofa, slamming his cane fiercely against the floor. It made a heavy, dull thud. He was waiting for Zhou Qingyue to bring back the final audit report from the company, and waiting for Zhou Ming's so-called reasonable explanation. I sat diagonally across from him in an armchair, holding that faded old phone in my hand. My fingertips swiped gently across the screen. The doctor had said, when the entire chain of evidence points to a single person, the truth is no longer a secret. It becomes a trial. The front doors were violently thrown open. Zhou Qingyue stormed in, bringing a chill with her. She was gripping a crumpled file in her hand. Her eyes were bloodshot as she glared death at Zhou Ming, who was sitting on the other side of the room. Zhou Ming was huddled in my mom's arms, keeping his head down. His shoulders were shaking as he sobbed. Sis, please, let me explain. I swear I was set up. Zhou Ming's voice was choking with tears. It was the same old pathetic victim act he always played. Zhou Qingyue didn't say a word. She just smashed the stack of papers right into Zhou Ming's face. The papers scattered all over the floor. Every single page was stamped with official seals from the bank and the police. Set up? Zhou Qingyue's voice was shaking. She was losing her mind with absolute fury. Zhou Ming, that offshore account with 100 million. It was opened under your exact name. And that anonymous email framing Zhou Ting? The IP address traces right back to the laptop sitting right in your study. Tell me, who the hell could hack into your brain to frame you? Zhou Ming's sobbing stopped dead. He stared at the evidence on the floor, his face draining of all color. It turned deathly pale. My mom's eyes went wide. She instinctively pulled her arms away from Joe Ming. Ming, is what Qingyue saying the truth? My mom's voice was shaking violently. My dad suddenly shot up from his seat. He crossed the room to Joe Ming in 3 huge strides, raising his hand and delivering a deafening slap. You little bastard, my dad roared, his chest heaving heavily. Our family raised you for 20 years. And you destroy my company with your own 2 hands, all for a little bit of cash? And you even sent your brother to that kind of place. Joe Ming was slapped so hard his head jerked to the side. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. He suddenly dropped the act. Slowly raising his head, he wiped the blood from his lips. And let out a spine-chilling sneer. My brother? Joe Ming glared at my dad, his eyes full of venom. What kind of brother is he? Ever since he came back. Have you even looked at me? I just wanted some security. Is that so wrong? My mom stared at the adopted son who now looked like a complete stranger. Her body swaying before collapsing heavily onto the couch. She burst into loud sobs. Just, call the cops. My dad closed his eyes, his voice sounding like it had aged 10 years in an instant. Zhou Qingyue looked at me, her eyes filled with shattered guilt. Ting Ting, I'm so sorry, your big sister was completely blind. She walked toward me, reaching out to grab my hand. I pulled my hand back, dodging her touch entirely. Director Joe, I stared at her collarbone. My tone completely flat, devoid of any emotion. My doctor says, delayed justice only serves to soothe the abuser's conscience. Zhou Qingyu's hand froze in midair. I pulled out a few pre-printed forms from my bag and spread them flat on the coffee table. Since the truth is finally out, let's settle our accounts once and for all. I looked around the room at the weeping people. Mr. Joe, Mrs. Joe, Director Joe. I addressed them by their formal titles, one by one. The $100 million embezzlement was Joe Ming's doing. He will face the legal consequences. But the decision to send me to that reform school 3 years ago was made by you all. I handed over a signing pen. I don't accept verbal apologies. An apology is the absolute cheapest thing in the world. I want every single one of you, regarding the decision to illegally strip me of my freedom 3 years ago, to write a formal statement, sign it, and stamp it. Zhou Qingyue was stunned. Why? Why do you need this? My doctor says, only when mistakes are cemented on paper will people truly feel the pain. I stared at her calmly. You'd all rather admit the adopted son was wrong, than face the fact that you actively abused me back then. Sign it. Only after you sign, will the compensation process for what you owe me officially begin. My dad stared at the statement, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't even grip the pen. Ting Ting, do we really have to take it this far? We're family. I let out a soft chuckle. Then I'll just follow my doctor's plan. Starting today, there is no family for me in the Zhou household. Only my debtors. Zhou Qingyue gritted her teeth and was the first to sign her name. Her tears smashed onto the paper, smudging the dark ink. My dad and mom signed too. As they wrote, their movements were so agonizingly slow it looked like it drained a lifetime of energy. I gathered the signed statements and carefully slipped them into a plastic file bag. Zhou Qingyue just watched me, voice choking with emotion. Ting Ting, we've found out the truth, and we've dealt with Joe Ming. Can you stay? I picked up my canvas bag and looked toward the front door. The night was pitch black out there. The doctor said, once a dead limb is amputated, it should never be reattached. I walked out of the Zhou family's main hall without looking back. Behind me were my mother's desperate cries, and Zhou Qingyue apologizing over and over. But inside, I felt completely at peace. Truly at peace. My phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unsaved number. Did you get it? I replied with a single word. Yeah. The person on the other end replied instantly. Excellent. Come back, Mr. Joe. I stared at that text message, and for the first time, a faint ripple of emotion crossed my eyes. Observation log, day 12. The truth is finally out. Debtor identity confirmed. The Zhou family has finally admitted to their sins. But they have lost my forgiveness forever. The doctor said that only after a full reckoning comes true freedom. The Zhou family villa had never been this neat before. Joe Ming was taken away for investigation. The family portrait that used to hang right in the middle of the living room, the one with the 5 of them plus the adopted son, was personally taken down by my dad. He threw it into the storage room, frame and all. For the first time ever, The Joe family had formed a bizarre united front, kick out the adopted son, investigate what happened back then, compensate their biological son. The dining table was covered in dishes. Every single one was made based on my faint memories from before I was 8. Back when I still lived in the Joe house. My dad sat at the head of the table. My mom sat to the side, and my 3 older sisters were lined up next to her. They were all staring at me. Their eyes were filled with this sickeningly sweet affection. Ting ting. These are your favorite sweet and sour ribs. Mom made them just for you. My mom placed a piece of meat into my bowl. Her hands trembling slightly. Mom was so foolish before. I was totally blinded by that ungrateful wretch. From now on, I promise I'll make it up to you, double. I stared at the rib in my bowl. The doctor said, when someone starts using food to apologize, it means they've completely run out of meaningful ways to connect. I didn't even touch my chopsticks. Mrs. Joe. I gently pushed the bowl away. My movements were as steady as if I were pushing aside a useless piece of paperwork. The doctor said, eating food that's been expired for 3 years will poison you. Care that's been expired for 3 years does the exact same thing. My mom's smile completely froze. Tears instantly spilled from her eyes. Ting ting, you still blame me, don't you? Mom really knows she was wrong. Ms. Joe, I don't blame you. I looked at her, my tone flawlessly polite, yet feeling as if there was a thick layer of bulletproof glass between us. Blaming someone requires a massive amount of emotion, and I have none left. My oldest sister, Jo Qingyue, suddenly spoke up. Her voice was hoarse, still carrying that faint, unquestionable tone of command. Jo Ting, since the truth is finally out in the open, I'll immediately issue a statement from the company. We'll clear your name completely. I've already had 5% of the Joe Group's original shares transferred to your name. Consider it compensation. She looked at me, her eyes carrying a heavy expectation of, look at me, I've already backed down this much. So you should just be satisfied. I looked back at my oldest sister. 3 years ago, she stood right here and slapped me across the face herself, telling me that a thief like me didn't deserve the Joe family name. President Joe. I gave a slight smile, but my eyes remained completely dead. Do you want me to be reasonable, or do you just expect me to keep taking your abuse? Jo Qingyue froze, the color draining completely from her face. Do you really think 5% of the company's shares can buy off my 3 years of false imprisonment? Do you think a simple public statement can erase the absolute void in my brain from being electroshocked? I pulled a bank card out of my bag and slid it smoothly to the center of the dining table. Here's the cash equivalent for everything you've given me these past few days. I won't bother explaining. Explanations are only for people who actually care to listen. Is everything you're doing right now meant to win me back, or just to make yourselves feel less guilty? Those words cut like a scalpel, slicing right through the Joe family's thick layer of hypocrisy for everyone to see. The living room fell dead silent. My dad slammed his wine glass down on the table with a sharp crack, spilling liquor everywhere. Jo Ting, what the hell do you want from us? He growled, his eyes red and tearing up. Joe Ming's life is already ruined. Are you trying to destroy the rest of us, too? We are family. Blood ties can't just be severed. Blood ties is such a convenient phrase. It was the exact chain that dragged me down into the abyss 3 years ago. And now, 3 years later, it's the hook trying to drag me right back into that dungeon. My therapist said that right and wrong aren't just feelings. They are based on behavioral evidence. I stood up, smoothing out my faded, overworn shirt. The behavioral evidence shows that your actions over the past 3 years were purely abusive. And your actions right now? That's just you throwing a pity party for yourselves. My third sister, Jo Yui, suddenly rushed over, opening her arms to hug me. She was sobbing uncontrollably. Ting ting, I'm begging you, please don't be so cold to us. I'll take you out sketching. I'll take you anywhere you've ever wanted to go. Can we just start over? Please? I stepped sideways, completely dodging her embrace with clinical precision, keeping my hands firmly inside my pockets. Third sister, I addressed her like that for the very last time. My tone as hollow as a passing breeze. You just crossed my personal boundaries. My therapist said that any physical contact against someone's will is considered assault. I stared at her arms frozen in midair. There wasn't any hatred left in my eyes. Only an absolute, hollow numbness. What on earth makes you think I still need you people to believe in me? Starting today, you are no longer family to me. You are nothing but my debtors. I turned around and headed for the stairs, each step heavy and grounded. Behind me, I could hear my mother's agonizing, heart-wrenching sobs, my father's heavy, defeated sigh, and Zhou Qingyue shouting out in sheer powerlessness. To me, it was all just background noise. Getting back into my room, I shut the door tight, and pulled the heavy curtains closed. I took out that old cell phone. I opened my notes and typed out the final entry for today. Observation log, day 13. Heavy emotional noise. Test conclusion. They are trying to fix the relationship to erase their own guilt. Directive. Refuse reconciliation. Terminate the relationship. I started packing my bags. I didn't have much, just that old canvas bag. My doctor told me loving myself is rule number 1. And in the rules of loving myself, there is absolutely no room for the Zhou family. I picked up my bag. I took one last look at this room that reeked of decay. The Zhou family actually thought that just by getting rid of Zhou Ming, everything could go back to the way it was 3 years ago. What they didn't know was that the Zhou Ting who just wanted to be loved 3 years ago had already died on that freezing electroshock bed. As I walked down the stairs, the whole Zhou family was still standing frozen in the dining room. I didn't say a word to them. I felt zero attachment. I just walked straight ahead and pushed open those magnificent front doors. The night air outside was chilly. Carrying that faded canvas bag, I stepped out to the front gate of the Zhou family mansion. This would be my very last time standing here. 3 years ago, I was dragged out of here. A few days ago, I was begged to come back. And now, I'm walking away on my own. Ting ting. A heavy thud came from behind me, followed by my mother's agonizing screams. She didn't even have her shoes on. She had dropped straight to her knees on the marble floor, clinging desperately to the hem of my pants. Mom is begging you, please don't go. I'll give you my life, okay? Everything in the past was my fault. I never should have trusted that ungrateful snake. I'll go die right now, as long as you just stay. I looked down at her beautifully manicured hands. Right now, her knuckles were turning white from how hard she was gripping me. 3 years ago, those exact same hands had pushed with this much force. Except back then, she was shoving me away, telling me to never come back and humiliate the Zhou family again. Mrs. Zhou, I called out to her softly. My tone was completely flat. My doctor told me that emotional breakdowns are a sign of sheer incompetence. Getting on your knees won't change the facts. That agreement you signed 3 years ago has been in effect for over 1,000 days now. And for those 1,000 days, my home hasn't been with the Zhou family. She looked up at me, her face completely covered in tears. Her eyes were filled with pure terror and desperation. No, your last name is Zhou. You are my own flesh and blood. You belong to the Zhou family. Blood is thicker than water. Ting ting, are you really going to listen to whatever that doctor said, and just throw us away? My third sister, Zhou Yui, stood off to the side. She was crying so hard her whole body was violently shaking. She reached out, trying to grab my sleeve, but then, remembering what I had just said, she flinched and pulled her hand back. Ting ting, I'm begging you, let's go do another DNA test. We'll invite the whole city. We're going to announce to absolutely everyone that you are the one and only young master of the Zhou family. We will make it up to you. We'll give you the best of everything. My father remained standing in the shadows, not saying a single word. He stepped forward, his voice deep and heavy, dripping with self-righteous comfort. Ting ting, I know you're throwing a tantrum, and I know you feel wronged. The shares, the villa, as long as you want them, I, Zhou Jinan, will give them all to you today. Stop talking about cutting ties. The doors of the Zhou family will always be open for you. After all, my blood runs in your veins. I looked at him, looked at this father who, even now, still thought money and bloodlines could fix everything. Mr. Zhou, I finally spoke. My eyes were clear, but I looked at him as if he were a lifeless, dead object. What makes you think I still need your trust? What makes you think I would, for the sake of this blood money, lock myself back in this cage? I took out the manila envelope I had brought with me, and placed it on the entryway cabinet. This is the declaration of severed ties, and the application to remove my name from the family register. I've already applied for my own independent household. From now on, my last name is no longer Zhou. I am just me. My doctor told me that loving myself is the golden rule. Staying here would make me break that rule. My second sister, Zhou Ruxiao, had tried to use legal jargon to make me stay. But when she saw that envelope, this top-tier lawyer who had never shown weakness in court, suddenly collapsed onto the sofa. You're actually taking your name off the register." She stared at me, completely devastated. "Zhou Ting, legally, blood ties cannot be broken. What's the point of doing this, other than just to hurt us?" "The point?" I asked back, letting out a soft laugh. "I'm not looking for a point. I'm just looking for an end. An end to these 3 years of pure torture." My oldest sister, Zhou Qingyue, pushed the door open and rushed in, holding a document she had just signed. An agreement transferring her control over the corporate group. Her eyes were bloodshot red, and her voice was terrifyingly hoarse. "Zhou Ting, look at this. I've already sent Zhou Ming to the police station. I can even give the company to you. Don't you hate me? Just stay. You can torture me however you want. Please, don't go." The total breakdown in her eyes was real. Her regret was real, too. But to me, this was just the typical self-righteous pity the Zhou family loved to wallow in. "CEO Zhou," I looked at her, my words incredibly light. "I don't hate you. Hate is reserved for the people you actually care about. And I don't care what you think." I gently slipped out of my mother's grasp. It was a chillingly smooth motion, without a single ounce of hesitation. As if her very last string had snapped, my mother completely blacked out and collapsed. The Zhou household erupted into total chaos. My father's furious roars, my third sister's wailing, my second sister's sobbing. That was the final, decent layer of skin the Zhou family had worn for decades. Totally ripped to shreds by my own hands. I walked to the door. The night breeze was a bit chilly, and it felt incredibly nice against my face. I paused for a second, my back turned to them. "I'm going to see someone. Don't come looking for me. The doctor said my new life begins today." I stepped out the gates. Behind me, that magnificent, brightly lit mansion looked like a lonely tomb under the streetlights. The people living inside are the very ones who buried me with their own hands 3 years ago. And now, the truth has finally come to light. But the Zhou Ting who was lost is never coming back. I took out my phone. I lit up the screen. There was only one message from an unsaved number. "Meet me at the entrance." I took a deep breath and walked toward the silhouette waiting under the streetlight. My footsteps were so light. It felt like I had never been heard at all. At an old bus stop on the edge of the city, I stood under the streetlight, holding my faded canvas bag. The Zhou family didn't follow me. The severance letter I left behind for them is enough for Zhou Ruxiao to obsess over for weeks. It's also enough for my father, in the dead of every night, to endlessly savor the bitter taste of utter betrayal and isolation. The doctor said that after the final reckoning, you should never look back at the burning house, because the cries coming from the flames are only there to lure you back to die with them. A black SUV silently pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing a face that was extremely calm, even unnervingly pale. Wei Yuru. She wore gold-rimmed glasses, her hair strictly tied back. When her gaze landed on me, it didn't feel like she was looking at an old friend after a long reunion. Instead, it felt like she was examining a perfect piece of experimental data. "You're 3 minutes and 14 seconds late." She spoke, her voice like an academic paper written on a page. Precise and freezing cold, that little parting show of family affection the Zhou family put on. "Wasted far too much of your life's precious capital." I opened the door and got into the passenger seat. The air conditioning in the car was blasting, almost piercing to the bone. But I really liked this feeling. Compared to that suffocating, fake warmth of the Zhou family, this extreme cold actually made me feel safe. They found out the truth. I stared at the pitch-black road ahead, my tone completely flat. Zhou Ming was sent to the detention center. My mother fell to her knees and begged me. Zhou Qingyue wanted to hand the Zhou group over to me. Zhou Yui cried until her eyes were swollen. I paused for a second, feeling Wei Yuru's gaze resting on my knuckles gripping the bag. But I didn't want to smile at all. I didn't feel the slightest bit of satisfaction either. I just felt it was all so meaningless. Wei Yuru started the car, the engine letting out a low rumble. Regret is a luxury meant for the abusers. It has nothing to do with the victims. She kept her eyes on the road, her long, pale fingers rhythmically tapping the steering wheel. "Zhou Ting, you must understand, their pain right now is entirely because they've lost their control over you. Not because they suddenly